Hiring is only the starting line. What actually determines whether someone becomes a high performer or a short timer is about everything that happens next: the development, the alignment, the ongoing investment in who they are and who they're becoming. Today, I have a special guest, Dan Vanderman. He spent a career helping leaders just like you out there turn our new hires, new employees. Maybe we're just transitioning into a new organization, but he has helped make them long-term contributors. And, we're going to unpack some of the systems. We're going to have a great conversation today, Dan. And we're going to talk about some strategies that make employees stick and thrive. So, Dan, welcome to the Leaders Leading Leaders podcast. This is a long time coming, sir.
I am super excited and appreciative that you invited me on. Love having conversations.
Well, you're very, very welcome. And, one of the things that I immediately want to kind of dive into in this conversation today, this conversation is speaking to the leaders out there that may be having some challenges around onboarding, may be having some challenges around, once we get them on board, how do we develop them into the best possible employee? And a lot of that comes down to the systems and processes that Dan has a ton of experience in. We've talked, I've picked his brain, and I'm just excited to share that with everybody today. So, Dan, let's jump right into the conversation. And this first really topic that we're going to talk about is all around talent development as a strategic advantage. So let's talk about that full talent life cycle. And when we think about that, tell the listeners what stages matter the most in your opinion when it comes to that long-term retention.
Yeah, it's a great question, John. That I think the challenge that most people don't realize is that, like you mentioned in the start of the conversation, a lot of development actually happens at the talent acquisition part. Now, that's not the whole thing, right? But you've got to make sure that you're sourcing the right headcount. The next piece I think that comes into it, and that's more to what you're asking, I think the challenge is, how do we keep them engaged when they first touch base with our company, right? Become aware of our company. How do we keep them engaged? How do we grow them? As far as keeping them engaged, it starts at the very first day that they touch base with you. I think that the lead up to that training is just as important though. So your challenge is going to be, how do I engage with that employee before day one of training? And that is super important to get them in that life cycle to start their process of saying, hey, I know this company, I trust this company. And a lot of employees are about trust, right? So if they trust you, they're going to listen to you, they're going to learn from you, they're going to gain the knowledge that they need to gain, and they're going to be successful. It doesn't stop there though. You're talking about the entire life cycle. The life cycle then moves into onboarding. Onboarding is many things. It depends on the company. But you've got to have systems and processes in place of exactly how that progresses, right? And then I think the bigger issue for me has always been, in the 30 years that I've done this, has been that a lot of times when we get into a training mode, we train them and we think, gosh, we've now spent 5, 6, 10 weeks with them and we've trained them. They know how to do their job. And we let go of them and we say, hey, fly, be free, right? The challenge is going to be that there's still learning to be done. If you think about any perfect training program, it doesn't train you on 100% of what you need to do any job. So the challenge becomes, how much do I have to get across the board to make them dangerous and to allow them to continue to grow? What I've found is about the sweet spot is about 70%. So if you can give them about 70% of what they need to know, and those are the core principles of what their job is, right? What their knowledge, what their skills, what their soft skills are, give them 70% of that knowledge, build 15% into a process document database, real-time learning, on-the-spot knowledge, right? Like, if this happens once in my career, what do I do with it, right? You've got to have that backup. That gets you to about 85. The other 15% comes from the coaches, the trainers, the leaders who touch base with that rep going forward, or that worker, or whoever, whatever role they're filling. And that's where the life cycle becomes super important to answer your question. Life cycle doesn't end though once they're 100% compatible with the job. They're still, hey, how do I grow their career? How do I make them a successful leader? How do I make them John Espinosa, right? Like, how do I develop that person? That's the challenge. The challenge is you've got to always have something that they're learning in order to keep them engaged in your business. If somebody is not learning, they'll be looking for that other opportunity. And that's the first time that they decide, hey, I'm going to look outside of the walls of confines of this business, whatever your business is. If you're an entrepreneur, you can't afford to lose that brain trust. You've invested in them. So I think that's the challenge, right? What does that life cycle look like? It should go all the way to, I call it cradle to grave, from the minute you become aware of my company to the minute you become an alumni, right? I should own that whole process.
Yeah. No, that is a great point. And we've been talking about on this season when there are voids created within a training cycle. And like you said, cradle to grave, those voids, people start to fill them with their own meaning. And it could be, like you mentioned, is this the right fit? Is this the right place for me? And I find that leaders struggle with that. For some reason, we begin to say, ooh, Dan has it. He's a sharp guy. We hired him. I hired him. I looked at your resume. You understand the culture. And we begin to pull back. And I don't know if you notice the same thing in organizations that you've worked for. When that leader begins to pull back too soon, that employee now, they begin to struggle or they begin to make up what they believe. They assume the expectations, the standards and what the culture looks like. I don't know if you've seen that in your experience, but it's something that I've noticed with organizations that I've worked with in the past.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They can fill in the gaps. The other thing that happens is they feel a sense of change, right? And so as the leader pulls back, the employee is going to not just look for reasons of, what that culture is, but they're also going to say, what have I done to cause this, right? And then they can get disengaged. And that disengagement is dangerous to any training.
Hey everyone, a quick break in the episode today. Are you struggling to find and keep the right employees? You're not alone. High turnover drains time, money, and morale, leaving us frustrated, overwhelmed, and feeling like we have to settle for less. I understand how tough hiring can be because I've lived it. And with over 21 years of building high-performance teams, I know how to turn hiring challenges into lasting employee success. Through my proven lead framework, we're going to analyze your processes, design a personalized strategy, and implement solutions that create confident and long-term results. Don't let turnover hold you back. Choosing this program is that first step towards a thriving workplace. Enroll today at thejohnespinosa.com and build the team you deserve. Imagine a team that works seamlessly together or keep facing the same costly cycle of turnover. The choice is yours. Now back to our episode.
Cycle.
Yeah. And I think that rolls right into our second topic, and that's alignment, right? And alignment, it really, when we look at, people ask me all the time, John, you talk about alignment, but where is that in the organization? And I'd love to hear your idea when you use the word alignment, especially in a training or a life cycle, talent development type world. What does that look like to you?
It can be taken in so many contexts. I think the biggest danger of alignment, I want to start there, I guess. The biggest danger in alignment is that senior leadership does not see things the rest of the way the chain does, right? And so if you think about it from the standpoint of, let's say I've got an agent in a business, right? Like somebody frontline that's working with the public. And that person is critical to the success or failure of a business. I mean, technically, that person can fire everybody in the business by their actions or their behaviors. And so that alignment of not just having the vision at a director or a VP level or that C level, that C suite, right? That vision doesn't always make it down to the front line. It may make it to the supervisor, but the way the training is delivered sometimes can be out of alignment with that vision. So, you get a training manager, you get a talent development manager who is going to push the narrative of what they believe is right. But if it's not in alignment with the senior leader's vision, then your company fails.
Mm.
And so I think that's where I wrestle with a challenge of saying, is it a challenge or is it just a communication issue? I think communication is a huge piece of well, obviously that seems pretty redundant, but any training organization, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. I think you hit the nail on the head there. What are some signals that misalignment signals that leaders can look out for? Like if I'm leading the organization, if I'm that CEO, if I'm that business owner out there, what are some signals that I can look for when misalignment starts to occur?
Yeah, if you're talking about a large organization, where you're going to see those misalignment signals are in constant changes, right? Influx, rapid movements. Maybe you have an SLA in a corporation, like a corporation I work for. You may have an SLA of 10 days. In other words, we're going to launch something on the first of the month. That means by the 20th of the month, I have to have all training in place. I have to have the plan worked out. Everything has to be in alignment. What I will see, and I think a lot of people see in my position, is that at a C-level executive level, I will see that misalignment happen immediately. There will be conversations between me, my peers, maybe even subordinates that are, this is not going to go off as planned, right?
Mm.
Usually that happens, or those things happen, or those rapid changes happen through misalignment. That's a very first signal. From the front line, I think the misalignment is a missed date. They don't know about it until we've missed a deadline, right? And then obviously that's where the trust goes out the window. I think trust is such a huge piece in training that we don't talk about enough, is that my employees or my direct reports or the company's direct reports, they're filtering that information and getting that change that's happening, whatever it is. They have to trust in their leadership. If they don't, they're not going to listen to the message. And I think from an entrepreneurial standpoint, your key indicators are usually your market.
Mm.
So if you're not in tune with the market, that's where you're going to see a misalignment. You think that you're doing the right thing. You might think, hey, being on social media on Facebook is a great plan, right? To push my business forward. What you're not realizing is your demographic is 18 to 25-year-olds for your business. Your 18 to 25-year-olds are not on Facebook. You are wasting your time. But you don't even realize that misalignment has happened until you start seeing it in the bank, right? You start missing those sales. So it depends on what kind of business you're talking about. But if you're a leader of an entrepreneur, you've got to really pay attention to your till. You've got to really pay attention to what your frontline employees are saying. And you have to be even more connected to what their feedback is from either the customer level or the front line in order to pivot quickly. A corporation's got a little more bandwidth and a little more latitude to make some mistakes.
Yeah.
An entrepreneur usually does.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can happen pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think what you just said right there is an important point for our listeners to take away is for a bigger corporation, you may have more time under a misalignment type structure. But if you are running a small organization, your own business as an entrepreneur, that misalignment, it'll catch up to you pretty quick. And it may be detrimental to the organization. So let's tell them how to not have misalignment occur. And let's talk about clarity. And one thing that, around clarity is I find that it needs a process. I don't know if you found similarly that when we talk about clarity, what does that process look like? In your experience, how have you led that process or how have you trained that process, starting at the top all the way down to the employees?
Yeah, I think the process has to start at the top. Wherever the vision comes from, that process has to start there. The way that we deal with it in our business is it's a KISS method. Keep it silly, simple, right? I'm going to clean that up a little bit. Process The death of process is in complexity. And sometimes we think we have to make it super complex to train people to do a process. We really don't, right? It's really about keeping it incredibly simple. So when you dissect, we work backwards. So what is your outcome? What is your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? Where are we starting? Okay, great. Let's work backwards. How do we deconstruct this? It's a little bit like a chef in a kitchen, right? Chef's going to say, okay, I want to make X, but how do I make X, right? We do the same thing. All of our processes are designed so that anybody could walk in, identify a scripted process, and that's what we have. Every one of our processes has a script. That's super important. I don't mean script like, hey, what are you going to say? I mean, like, you're going to do this, then you're going to do this. This is where you find this. If you're training somebody, the situation is exactly the same. I don't care what role you're training them for. They've got to have it lined out so that, hey, I've never done it before, but if you handed me these process documents, I don't need you. I don't need your training. And that sounds counterproductive for training, but it really isn't. What it's doing is it's actually helping and supporting and bolstering that training by saying, hey, not only have I trained them, but they've got resource documents to go back to, and they won't need me again for this process. We don't have to go back through the retraining process. With some latitude, here's what I'm going to tell you. I see it over and over and over again, right? Where there's a problem on the front line, or there's a problem with a role, and the leader will come, the senior leader will come and say, hey, we need training. Okay. I'm wide open to that thought. What is it that they're not doing? We explain it, right? Here's what they're not doing that I want them to do. Great. Have we trained them on that before? We have. Okay. Did they pass competency? So all of our training has tests built in, right? We're going to evaluate competency. We have an execution model, which means we evaluate not just their knowledge, but their behavior. So we prove that they can do it. So if we train these people correctly, we gave them process documents, we identified that they could both transfer the knowledge and behave the correct way. And now 6 months later, they're not doing it. Is it a training issue or is it a management issue? And I think that's the challenge. The disconnect is sometimes in the fact that we just think we need their training and everything. And training isn't the answer for everything. And as a training leader, people are going to shoot me in the foot, but there are some places where that is really well defined, that it is training. And then there's sometimes we have to look at a hybrid model and say, okay, yes, they need some training, but we also need a coaching model. So when you're developing those process documents, you have to consider that, especially as an entrepreneur. Yes, I've got a process, but I also have a coaching process, and this is what is expected from the coach, and this is what's expected from the training organization. When those two things are in alignment, man, it's like heaven. It's like honestly heaven.
I think what you just said is worth its weight in gold, because you're right. I get called all the time and they say, hey, I got a training issue. And I'm in the consulting business. So heck, I'm going to come in and I'm going to train. But it's my job to come in and ask the hard question. Okay, what have they been trained before? Like you mentioned, did they reach competency? Do they have the behavior? Have they exhibited that behavior in the past? And, is there anything that's changed or anything that's standing in the way, cultural, environment wise? Did we train them on an iPhone and now we gave them a Motorola StarTAC, that sort of thing? Right? Is there equipment changes going on?
Sure.
It's just an example, because a lot of the times it's a performance issue. And there's not any money in the world that training will fix a performance issue. I'm sorry, and I think you just said that and in the great way that you say things. But I find this point alone to be something that leaders need to let sink in. They really need to take it to heart when we come in as training professionals and say, you don't have a training problem.
Right.
You have a performance issue problem. or an accountability problem, or, maybe you're not clear as far as your objectives and your expectations. It's a performance problem. And that's hard for some leaders to look in the mirror, to turn around and say, you know what? Yeah, especially in an entrepreneur or small business, because a lot of times you're the coach, you're the business owner, you're the one who throws the trash, but oh, by the way, you're the coach. And
Yeah.
and that's hard because you can't, well, tell me why it's hard. Tell me why you see that being a challenge for some of the leaders out there to make that flip, or to make that decision.
I'll tell you honestly, the biggest issue is you get a lot of type A personalities. Those type A personalities have huge egos, right? And so you have to be very constructive and very creative on how you deliver this message because they don't want to hear it. That's number one. Number two is fear. Leaders don't want to, leaders, if they're fearful of something, they don't want to admit they don't know it. And it's not necessarily ego. It's more about how do I deal with this now, right? John, you're in a perfect situation. Your consultancy is genius because quite frankly, somebody's going to succeed or fail based on that consultancy. It's not always a training answer. They could invite you in and say, look, teach my leaders how to be leaders. I don't need to train the front line, even though they're not performing. I need to train the leaders. And nothing could explain that better than, we had a situation where we had over 200 stores in the company I was working for. And short version of this story is that the front line wasn't selling. They weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. And the stores were kind of in danger of being closed. I said, give me 5 stores. Let me prove the value of this training. And I went in and they expected me to train the front line. I trained the leaders. When we trained the leaders, the stores executed at 216% above goal, 45 days out from training.
Wow.
And then failing stores, we were going to shut them down. And the executive leaders came and said, what did you do to train this front line? I said, absolutely nothing. I didn't touch them. I said, but I trained the leaders and then I inspected what I expected. And I spent time with those leaders and said, okay, now do it again. Now do it again. Now do it again. Give feedback. Do it again. And we repeated the process until they were just like spot on and they didn't need me anymore. And then we could step back.
Yeah.
After those 5 stores were proven, we got them all. Yeah. But the consultancy that you offer, that's huge. Yeah. That's huge because that's the answer.
I think, and I run into this where our ego begins to get in the way of the real issue. And you're right. I find just an example that I had a conversation with an employee today, and their management hadn't communicated them team meeting, one-on-one, email in about 4 months. 4 months daily, right? And this is a top performer. This is a star of the organization. I mean, she's performing at a very high level, and she began going back to the void. So there's this communication void, right? And I get a call, and 2 hours later from the leader, and he's like, I just can't get my team to do what they're supposed to do. So, see that, and you just illustrated that disconnect. It's like from the top, we say, and then the answer a lot of times is, I just over communicate. I got to tell them more. I got to say it more often. It's like, time out. Just let's go have a conversation, right? And that starts with the leader. It starts with the leader putting the ego away, getting curious, becoming very, very interested in that individual employee, what their challenges are, what some of the things that, they're seeing. And I find it's hard for us as leaders to do that. And I'm not sure, I once I put my finger on it, trust me, I'm going to, patent it and we'll all be out of business. But I want to, just ask you, when we talk about, and it impacts growth. That's the thing. Like when we spend all this time onboarding, because we've been talking about onboarding and now we got them onboarded. We know that they're good employees, but now what we need to move into really is, okay, what are those growth strategies? Where's the internal mobility? How are we going to retain those employees. And so how do we keep people committed to an organization year after year? What's the secret behind that?
Well, the secret is such a multi-pronged approach. So think about what people want. That's what you have to ask first is what do people want? Nobody is the same. So what you want from your job is going to be different from what I want from my job and what my goal is and my career is. Age. Age is going to have a factor. I hate to say age is a thing, but if you're in your late 50s, early 60s, you might be thinking about retirement. If you're 20, you're thinking about what's upward mobility. So I think it comes down to connecting to the individual employee and asking what they want. But some things that I don't think we always think about from a business standpoint is keeping them engaged to your question. Think about money. I mean, money isn't the end all, but money has impact, right? And people go someplace else for money. Growth is if I want to be, let's say that you're my boss, right? And you're 25 years old. I don't have any forward thought that, hey, you're probably going somewhere in the next 5 years and I could take your job. So then I'm thinking, well, what's my growth? My growth option is to go outside the company. So if we're really trying to retain that person, I've got to build that growth in. And what does that look like? If you're thinking about it from the standpoint of growth opportunities, it's not always, hey, they have to have another job. Maybe they have more responsibility. And with that responsibility comes a small raise. It doesn't have to be on cycle. It could be off cycle. But you've got to be the person defending your employees. You've got to be the person saying constantly, what do I do? To your point with the high performer, right? I've often said this is that your high performers are where your best results are at. And I don't mean currently, I mean future. If I think about it from the standpoint, there's kind of a general rule out there that if I had 20 minutes to invest in an employee, where am I best investing it? If I invest it, and you know where this is going, right? You've been around. If I invest it in my lowest performer, which is typically what most leaders do, either with training or coaching or whatever, right? They're going to invest in that person because they're the problem child. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to fix it, right? Chances are you're never going to fix it. But if I spent 20 minutes with that person, I might get a 10% lift out of their production. If they're only producing half of what they should be producing in the first place, now I'm at 55%. But I've got high performers at 160% of goal, and I ignore them because they're kind of running on automatic, right? But if I spent that same 20 minutes with them and I got 10% lift, I'm getting 16%, not 5%. That other person's either going to figure it out and you'll still give them some time and they'll work themselves up or they'll work themselves out. They solve, I don't know if you watch Office Space, but we'll fix the glitch, right? You can't, there's two things you can't train. You can't train drive and you can't train intelligence. Those things that have got to come automatically internally. And I think that's the challenge. So you've got to ask the person, I think to recap, you've got to ask the person, what do they want? What's their goal? What do they want out of this business? Are they here for a short time or a long time? You got to figure that out. Then you've got to figure out ways to give them what they want. Even if it's a small win every year, every 6 months, whatever, give them something. And if they do what you're asking them to do, then reward them accordingly because you can't afford to lose that person. They're willing to do anything for you, walk through fire. You give them what they need to stay. That other person that's not doing a darn thing with or without the raise, you let them fix the glitch. They can go. That's the answer that I would probably give to any business.
Yeah. And what would you say? Because this is something else. This is another, well, we'll just call it an excuse. We'll call it what it is. I don't have the time to invest in my employees, or I'm a small business and I don't have the money, or I'm fearful that if I do invest, they'll move, they'll go somewhere else.
Yep.
What would you say to that leader?
Money wisely invested multiplies. So it depends on where you invest your money. I would be the first person to say, don't spend money you don't have to spend, but that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You invest those people in those high performers, you invest in them, they will stay, they will grow, they will walk through walls of fire for you. Those are the people that you need to invest in because your business will grow.
Yep.
If you are just blindly giving away money, you're going to go bankrupt. You can't do that. The other thing I would say is the time. The time is a big thing. I hear that all the time. I don't have the time. I don't have the time. You do have the time. You have the same 24 hours in a day that I have. There's no difference. The difference is Are you going to spend that 24 hours as an entrepreneur wisely,
Mm.
or are you going to blow it? Because at the end of the day, we all have the same number of minutes in a year. There's no exception.
Yeah.
But these people that say, I don't have time, how much time are they spending on TV at night? How much time are they spending scrolling through their phones aimlessly? Like the death scroll, right?
Yep.
That is still time. It's wasted. And then the other people is, let's say you've got entrepreneurs who are just busy, like they are super busy with their business. And it's all stuff that probably should be done.
Yeah.
Now you ask yourself, what's your time worth? Can you hire somebody at $10 an hour to do what you're doing? Can you hire somebody at $30 an hour to take off another piece? But you make $150 an hour during that time.
Yeah.
So are you investing wisely? I had an attorney one time tell me, worked for a telecom, and I was an escalation manager. So I took all the calls that people would say, hey, we're going to sue you for everything you're worth, right? Like, okay, I thought we could work this out, but you do you, right? Had an attorney tell me one time, he says, this is ridiculous that we're dealing with this. And I said, I understand. I'm going to get this fixed for you. I'm very sorry that it's happened to you. And he said, you're wasting my time. I said, I'm sorry. I definitely apologize, right? And I said, try to get this done for you. I'm going to do it as quickly as I can. If you want, you can hang up. I'll call you back when it's done. He says, no, I'll stay here till it's done. Fine. Then a few minutes later, he says, I bill $1,500 an hour.
Mm.
Now in my head, I'm thinking, well, then you're not a very good businessman, because somebody for $20 an hour, a receptionist, could have sat here and talked to me while you billed $1,500.
Yeah.
That is the people who complain about the time. Dude, they're not thinking about their time right. I don't think.
Yeah.
Not correctly.
Yeah. No, you're 100% correct. You're, to the fact that I don't want to spend, and I've even seen business owners and leaders are like, they don't even want to spend $1,000 to get somebody training in AI or new training techniques or, project management, or because people will leave, or I don't have the money. But what you're not looking at is that $1,000 could 10x your investment in that person.
Yeah.
And they could be the next one to go out and bring you the project that takes you to that next level, right? And then the time issue, you're exactly right. We all have the same amount of time. It's time prioritization. I find myself even moving away from time management because of the fact that we all have the same amount of time. It's how we prioritize that time in a day, and hopefully we're prioritizing it on where we're going to see the biggest investment, and that will be in those high performers in our organization. And yeah, I know there's the cynics out there, there's the critics out there saying, John, I've been there, done that. I invested a lot of money in my high performer, and guess what? They went out and they started their own business, and they're competing with me, or they went out and then good for you, right? Good for you that you invested in another human being, that they're able to go start a company. Maybe that was their dream, that, they're able to provide for their family. That's how I look at that situation. And I don't know if you see it the same way. I'm sure you do, because I know you. But, what if you don't and they still leave?
People are going to leave. They're going to do what they want to do, and there's nothing you can do to stop them. I think the only thing you can do is pivot. And to your point, in that scenario, I would have been more, I think I would like to think I would have been more connected to that person before they left, so that I understood where they stood. And if I had that trust with them, they're going to be honest with me. They're going to say, hey, Dan, here's the deal. I want to start my own company.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, here's the thing. If you're an entrepreneur, what do? You start companies, right? Well, you know what, John, you're going to need an investor. Let's do this. I'm going to coach you, get you up to speed. And within 5 years, we're going to get you into your own company, and I'm going to be your silent partner. I could do nothing more than root for you and be happy for you. I want this to be successful.
Yeah.
Invest. You've got another company now that's now a mailbox paycheck that's making you money, and you literally have to do nothing because you developed that high performer to work for your business for 5 years. And as a result, they got something out of the deal too, right? And you give them equity. You give them equity because they will work so hard.
Yep. No, and you are so correct. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. you either take one or two models in my mind when it comes to developing people. You develop wide or you go deep. And
Yep.
for me, the model that I've done both. I've gone and walked into businesses, organizations, and clients are like, I want you to train as many people to be proficient as you possibly can. I'm like, okay, I get it. And then I've gone into organizations and they've said, I want you to train these 5 people as much as you possibly can. And we're going to go deep. We're going to invest so much money into those 5 people that they they may even, turn into owners of the company. It may be something. And this is the other thing to the entrepreneur out there that doesn't want to spend the time and the money is if you are looking for an opportunity to one day get out of the entrepreneur business, and because that's what everybody's really dream is, I create something and then I sell it for as much money as I possibly can, right? If you are the single point of failure in that organization, if you're the one making all the decisions and you're the one that's trained, I don't want to buy your company because you haven't invested in what I want to buy, right? And I think that's a great point that you made earlier is we got to think about the long-term value in the investment. We got to think of it as an investment and not a waste of money. It's like I get to invest in these employees. I don't have to invest in them. I get to do it. And that's a big switch that people have trouble making.
Show me a plumbing company that operates just with the use of trucks. They
Yep.
have to have people, right? Any company has to have people. So to your point, John, your biggest asset is your people. And if you don't invest in them, then they're going to fall apart. Just like if you didn't put new tires on that plumbing truck, it's going to fall apart. Your business stops. So you have to think about it from that standpoint. And to your point, I mean, the way I operate is kind of along the same lines. Even though I work for a corporation, I train people to take my job because quite frankly, it's a lot easier on my life if they know how to do my job. I have a guy that I've been working with for 2 years and I trust him and I can walk away from the business tomorrow and he could take over. He saved the company $3 million this year. I
Wow.
don't pay him $3 million,
Wow.
right? So he paid for his salary, my other team's salary. He paid for the whole thing. So I get to walk into the end of the year and I get to look like a glory child and I get to say, hey, this guy did the whole thing. I just got to sit back and clap. I mean, my development is what caused him to be who he is. Yes. But that was over a year ago.
Yeah.
Now he's his own person. And here's the thing. He's going to apply for another job right now within the company and I'm going to lose him. And that's fine. I'm happy for him. That's where we should be as investors in our people.
Yeah. Well said. I hope that everybody out there listening understands the value in what you just mentioned, because without, even with the AI, I hear a lot, and this is the other thing, Dan, we're just talking about challenges here and excuses that people come up with that, don't want to invest in their people is, AI, it's coming down the road. We can automate it. Don't worry, I don't have to invest. That's where I'm going to spend my money, right? And one of the things that I find, and tell me if you've seen this before, like we over engineer, you said it earlier, we over engineer the investment piece. It can come very, very small. If I'm a small business and I understand out there, I have had small businesses, money is tight, but investment in people can look like coaching, can look like a one-on-one conversation. Where do you want to go? Where do you want to be? And that can come from an hourly employee all the way up to a salaried employee or an executive that you have in the company. So I think that there's this misconception. I got to have this big bucket of money that I'm going to invest in my people. And the challenge is if I don't have that, then I just throw my hands up in the air and I hope, and hope is not a plan. Hope is not a strategy. So, I say that to say, when we look at developing within and we have an organization that is able to be healthy, an organization that people have ownership in, an organization that you have a leader who casts vision, who understands where you're going, that might not have all the answers. That's not what I'm talking about. You don't have to have all the answers to lead people, but you definitely have to have an understanding of who your people are. And that comes through part of the development. So,
Sure.
one thing, and as we kind of wrap up here, I want to take you through a lightning round. And these are five questions, four questions, and I just want to get your kind of gut, like quick hit takeaway.
Perfect.
This is something that I find pretty fun to do, and we always come up with some great answers. So, what is one misconception leaders have about talent?
It's expendable.
Okay, tell me more.
So, especially in this season, a lot of companies are going through a reduction in force and
Yep.
they're getting rid of their talent. What will happen is it's cyclical. So 6 months from now, they'll go back and try to rehire that talent because a lot of corporations spend that talent. They'll give them severance packages, let's say 6 months. So 6 months from now, those severance packages will be expiring. And guess what? You're hiring new people. You're going to hire them for more money than you originally paid the original people. You've now put out 6 months of not having that talent on board, and you still put out the money. And the only thing that you saved was losing that mind trust of all that years of experience that you just expended. People think that people are expendable, and they're not. Unfortunately, we need that. We need that intelligence. We need that experience to efficiently run any company you choose. I mean, it doesn't make a difference. You could have all different levels. You could have somebody with 1 year experience. You could have somebody with no experience. You could have somebody with 50 years of experience. But when you start cutting the 50 years of experience, you can expect an impact on your business.
Yeah, great point. All right, second one. What is one early signal someone is disengaging?
It depends on the situation, but they're going to be more aloof. They're going to be more reserved in meetings. They won't speak. They won't come on camera. That is usually a very good indicator in a corporate level. The other is going to be kind of half ankling their work. They'll get it done, but it's going to be right to the wire. They're not going to put any extra time. They're not going to fill out employee surveys like you think you want as a company. Those are some usually pretty immediate, notifications that, hey, this person's getting disengaged.
Okay. All right. I like it. I like it. Third one. What is one trait leaders should look for when they hire somebody?
That they're smarter than the leader.
Ooh.
If your ego gets in the way, you have no business running a business. That's my gut feeling. You asked for gut. That's my gut feeling. Three things I hire for: above average intelligence, self-drive, and willingness to be smarter than me.
Ah,
If those three things exist, we're good.
I like
We're
it.
good. Everything else trainable.
All right. Last one here. What's one development practice that pays off for you every single time?
Investing in your leadership first. 20 years training everybody from the frontline leader to the executive vice president. And I always got a bigger lift out of that. Invest in your leadership.
Awesome. Awesome. I want to just wrap up as we get, we're landing the plane here in our conversation. I am intrigued by one, your dedication to training. And I'm probably a little bit, biased because I also come from the training background and I got there in a very zigzag way. I started out in the restaurant business, fell getting into medical school, fell into training at the hospital I was working at that time, and was lucky enough to get picked up by a training organization. Moved around a little bit, did some strategic planning, and I got to where I'm going now as a training development manager with the organization, and kicked off a couple other businesses, consulting businesses and things. Share a little bit about your background and your story and how that forged who you are and how you view training and organizational development and personal development and everything that we've really talked about today.
Yeah. So historically, I owned five businesses, one of which was a consulting business. But I've owned five businesses. Happened into trading. I did not think that that's what I wanted to do. I came out of high school with a 4.22 average, played football, kind of thought, hey, that's the avenue I wanted to go. Went to college as pre-med, realized after seeing the surgery back then, you could be in the VA with an internship, even though you were just out of high school. They kind of let you shadow. And I got to see a surgery and I fell over face first during cauterization. So I knew medical wasn't it. Went into pre-law, realized I had to study for the rest of my life, no matter what happened. Didn't like that idea. Went to start a few businesses and my wife got transferred with her existing work. Kind of the background of that is that I needed a job. I sold my business, needed a job. So went to work for the telephone company back then, now the internet companies, but back then it was telephone, Bell System, and said I'd be here 6 months and I would leave. Decided it was a good gig, getting paid well, decent benefits. Back then you have a family, you need benefits. So that's where that came from. And ended up as an installation manager. Then I went into repair. It's cold outside in the winter in the Midwest, in case you didn't know. So I didn't like that. On a fluke one day, I was sitting behind some guy and he said, I'm going to go apply for that training position. And I'm like, training position? What's that about? And so I just did it on a fluke. I came back from the interview. He said, how did you do? I said, I failed it. There's no way they're going to hire me. They hired me. I have no idea why, still to this day. But they engaged it and I just worked up through the ranks. I'd done everything from training retail to training click to chat to training frontline agents to training leaders. I spent 20 years training all of the leaders in a Fortune 500 company on how to be leaders. And that's kind of what's led me to today. And now I have a team that manages over 6,000 vendors. Wow. Vendor agents. I train managers to be managers. I do that. I just realized I kind of like it, right? And you still study today. So why I got involved in this studying and not the other studying, I don't know. I wish I had a really cool answer for you, but I don't. It just kind of a zigzag pattern, like you were saying. And I just realized over time that there was a lot of knowledge out there that I could glean from other people that had been in where I've been, right? So I feel like this is helpful for me because I like helping people. And so if we've got some people watching that are like, oh yeah, I'd like to be where that guy's at someday, or I'd like his advice. For me, that's a win. And so I think that's why training resonates with me. I can help other people out and be that person that I looked up to, 30 years ago, 35 years ago. So yeah, yes, that's a really long answer. Sorry about that.
No, that was a perfect answer. It was a loaded question because we've talked before. And, I know your path was also zigzagged into this training world. And I think that's the point that I want to make for the listeners out there is you don't have to know everything. You don't like, I'm still learning. You mentioned you're still learning. It's about really your passion to help others. And when we as leaders, we have that burning fire to see others succeed more than us, like to see others do better than we could have ever imagined. I think as long as you have that, the rest will figure itself out.
Yeah.
The rest is just destiny, if I want to call it that.
It's interesting you say that because, I've one of the things I've always said, and we didn't really touch on it here, but I've always said focus on the behaviors, right? And so if you're helping people out, if you want to invest as a company, invest in the change of behavior. I think so many leaders look at the key performance indicators like, hey, if I do this, their handle time will come down or whatever. And truthfully, it's like a truck and a trailer. The trailer doesn't go anywhere without the truck driving it, right? And so if you think about the behavior will pull the KPIs where you want them to go. Don't worry about the KPIs. Don't even look at them.
Yeah.
Focus on the change of behavior. And that's what you get, whether it's training or coaching. It doesn't make a difference.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I'd say it better than that. So, one thing, Dan, before we get out of here, what's one of the most single best pieces of advice that you've gotten when it comes to leading and developing others?
Funniest or single best? I think that the best advice I've ever gotten was focus on what you can control and ignore everything else. It's just noise. If you're talking about training, you can't fix everything with training. You can't fix everything no matter what. So for the folks that are not going to change, you have to be able to quickly realize that,
Mm.
still give them the training, but they make their own choice. That's probably the best advice I've ever gotten.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. I see your friend over there. So
Yeah, she's saying hi.
she's saying hi. That's okay. She can say hi. I just want to say thank you, Dan. Thank you for spending the time with us today. Thank you for pouring out your heart and knowledge into our listeners of the Go Be Great community. It's been special. And, I hope that you'll come back because I know you got a lot more to share. And because I have a lot more questions, I have a lot more to learn from you. So thank you for your time tonight. I just want to say, everybody out there, use one of the things that we talked about. I'm going to challenge you. And I always end with the challenge, Dan. Like, we talk a lot about, these techniques and the philosophy, but I always want to challenge you out there, the listener. What's one thing that you can impart tomorrow, that you can implement tomorrow? Make sure that, it's not one day, but it's day one, and go before you're ready. And one thing that I just want to leave us with is I believe in everybody out there. Thank you for taking the time to invest in yourself. Go be great. We'll talk to everyone on the next episode. Bye-bye.